It was just after midnight on September 26, 1983. The Cold War was at its most dangerous point in decades. The United States and the Soviet Union were not just rivals. They were enemies armed with enough nuclear weapons to wipe out humanity several times over. One wrong move, one miscalculation, one false alarm could end the world in minutes. And on that night, the alarm went off. Deep inside a Soviet early warning bunker called Serpukhov 15, red lights suddenly began flashing. Sirens screamed. Computer screens lit up with a message no one ever wanted to see. Nuclear missile launch detected. According to the system, the United States had just launched an intercontinental ballistic missile toward the Soviet Union. Then another. Then another. Then another. 5 missiles in total. Protocol was clear. This was not a drill. If confirmed, the officer on duty was required to immediately report the attack up the chain of command. That report would reach Soviet leadership within minutes. Retaliation would follow almost instantly. Hundreds of nuclear missiles would be launched in response. World War III would begin. The man sitting at the control desk that night was a 44-year-old lieutenant colonel named Stanislav Petrov. He was not a politician, not a general, not a hero in the traditional sense. He was a systems engineer, trained to trust machines, procedures, and rules. And the system was telling him the United States had just started a nuclear war. Every second mattered. Missiles take about 30 minutes to reach their targets. That meant Soviet leaders had only a small window to decide whether to retaliate before their own country was destroyed. Petrov's phone rang. Officers looked at him, waiting. The computer's confidence level rose to its highest setting. The screen said the attack was real. This was the moment history balanced on a knife's edge. If Petrov followed protocol, he would report the launch. The Soviet Union would respond. The United States would retaliate. Europe would vanish. Major cities would be erased. Nuclear winter would follow. Civilization as we know it would likely end. And Petrov would have done everything right. But something didn't feel right. According to the system, only 5 missiles had been launched. Not hundreds, not thousands, just 5. Petrov knew U.S. nuclear strategy. A real first strike wouldn't be cautious. It wouldn't be limited. If America wanted to eliminate the Soviet Union, it would launch everything at once to ensure there could be no retaliation. 5 missiles made no sense. Then there was another detail. The warning system was new, recently installed, still untested under real conditions. Petrov had helped design parts of it himself. He knew its weaknesses. The satellites detected launches by spotting sunlight reflecting off missile exhaust plumes. But that meant unusual lighting conditions could confuse the system. Petrov looked at the data again. The ground-based radar systems, designed to confirm incoming missiles, showed nothing. No objects, no trajectories. But radar detection takes time. By the time radar confirmed the missiles, it might already be too late. Petrov had 2 choices: trust the machine or trust his instincts. If he guessed wrong and failed to report a real attack, the Soviet Union could be destroyed without retaliation. He would be remembered as the man who let his country die. If he guessed wrong the other way and reported a false alarm, he could trigger the end of the world. This wasn't just a technical decision. It was a moral one. Petrov picked up the phone, and he lied. He reported that the alert was a false alarm. He told his superiors that the system was malfunctioning. He did this without proof, without confirmation, without authorization. For nearly 20 minutes, the world waited. No missiles hit Soviet territory. No explosions lit up the horizon. Nothing happened. Petrov was right. The missiles were not missiles at all. They were reflections of sunlight off high-altitude clouds, perfectly aligned in a way the satellite had never encountered before. A cosmic coincidence, a rare atmospheric alignment, a flaw no one had predicted. Humanity survived, because one man broke the rules. But here's the strangest part of the story. Stanislav Petrov was not celebrated. He was not rewarded. He was not promoted. Instead, he was reprimanded. His superiors were embarrassed. The incident exposed serious flaws in the Soviet early warning system. Acknowledging Petrov's actions meant admitting the system, and the doctrine of automatic retaliation was dangerously unreliable. So the incident was buried. Petrov was criticized for improper paperwork, for not following protocol, for causing stress during the incident. He was quietly moved to a less important position and eventually retired early. For years, no one outside a small military circle knew his name. The man who may have saved billions of lives went home and lived a modest, quiet life in relative poverty. The world never thanked him. And what makes this story even more terrifying is that it wasn't the only time something like this happened. In November 1983, just weeks later, NATO conducted a military exercise called Able Archer 83. It simulated a nuclear war scenario so realistically that Soviet leadership believed it might be a real first strike disguised as an exercise. Nuclear forces were put on high alert. Once again, the world came dangerously close to annihilation. Then, in 1995, after the Cold War supposedly ended, Russian radar systems detected what appeared to be a U.S. missile launch from the North Atlantic. The object was actually a Norwegian scientific rocket studying the Northern Lights. But Russian early warning systems didn't know that. For the first time in history, the Russian nuclear briefcase was activated. President Boris Yeltsin was alerted. The launch codes were prepared. Once again, a decision had to be made in minutes. And once again, someone hesitated. Someone questioned the data. Someone chose not to push the button. The rocket splashed harmlessly into the ocean. The world survived. Again. These incidents reveal something deeply unsettling. The fate of human civilization has not been safeguarded by flawless systems, perfect technology, or rational doctrines. It has been saved by hesitation, by doubt, by human instinct. During the Cold War, both the U.S. and the Soviet Union relied on a concept called mutually assured destruction. The idea was simple. If both sides had the ability to destroy each other completely, neither side would ever start a war. But this logic depended on machines working perfectly. It depended on humans always making the correct decision under unimaginable pressure. And as Stanislav Petrov proved, the correct decision was not always the official one. Years later, when Petrov's story finally became public, journalists asked him why he ignored orders. His answer was chillingly simple. I didn't want to be the man responsible for starting World War III. He didn't call himself a hero. He didn't say he saved the world. He said he was just doing his job. But in reality, his job description never included deciding the fate of humanity. That responsibility fell on him by accident, by coincidence, by timing, by fate. Petrov died in 2017. When news of his death spread, many people around the world learned his name for the first time. Tributes poured in. He was called the man who saved the world. But think about how close we came. A different officer, a stricter rule follower, someone less willing to doubt a machine. And history would look very different. There would be no videos telling this story, no audiences listening, no future to debate. What this story really exposes is not just the danger of nuclear weapons, but the fragility of our survival. We like to believe the world is controlled, managed, safe in the hands of institutions and systems. But again and again, history shows us that everything can hinge on a single human moment. A pause, a question, a decision to say, "This doesn't feel right." Stanislav Petrov didn't save the world because he was powerful. He saved it because he was human. And that may be the most terrifying truth of all, because it means the world is still one decision away from ending, and always has been.